So have you ever come to the realization that the mountain might be you? if today, if so, today is your call. Welcome to our business leadership book club, where we're going into "The Mountain Is You" by Wiest. Briana Wiest, Wiest. Really, really powerful book about the process of self-sabotage. If you're ever somebody who has found yourself holding yourself back, talking yourselves out of things, over like confusing yourself, doing so many different things that tend to throw you off track, not only in your business, but also in your life, today's call is going to be a powerful one for you. So guys, welcome to our Modern Leadership Book Club. This is going to be a game changer. We have, over the last month, been diving into this book, sharing our takeaways inside of the app. But I wanted to get started today by really diving into the things that were like the most pivotal for me when I was reading this book. Now, here's the thing. This book, I feel like, is literally a blueprint to help you get out of your own self-sabotage. So if you're somebody who's struggling with self-sabotage, getting yourself to show up, or you just don't know what is going on, it just nothing seems to be working, definitely pick up this book, because it's like that blueprint that you need to find the pages that will speak loudest to you to find out how you can use this information for you. That being said, we are going to dive right into the introduction of the book. And she has a really powerful quote here. She says, when we can no longer rely on our coping mechanisms to help distract us from the problems in our lives, it can feel as though we've hit rock bottom. The reality is that this sort of awakening is what happens when we finally come to terms with the problems that have existed for so long. The breakdown is often just the tipping point that precedes the breakthrough. The moment a star implodes before it becomes a supernova. She talks about a lot of times when we find out that we're self-sabotaging, we can get to this point where it kind of feels like rock bottom. It kind of feels like we don't know what's going on. We don't know why we're doing this. We don't know, this is just another one of those things. Why do I keep doing this? And we keep attacking it like there's this huge problem that is never going to be able to be fixed. And she says that sometimes we need to get to that point so that we can realize that if we're the problem, then we might also be the solution if we're willing to see things a little bit differently. What's up, Anthony? What's going on, brother? See you a little bit later today, by the way, on the call. All right. So she says, your mountain requires you to reconcile two parts of you, the conscious and the unconscious. The part of you that you are aware of what you want, and the part of you that is not aware of why you are still holding yourself back. This is such a critical point. This is something we teach inside of our life coach certification. Is there a difference between your conscious mind, like what you're consciously thinking right now, versus what is actually running the show, which is all of the unconscious beliefs and thoughts that we have in our background? One of the things she talks about a lot in this book is the fact that sometimes we can be, or a lot of times we're self-sabotaging because of something that happened to us in the past, or a potential of something that happened in the past, or some trauma, or something that we're literally bringing from the past into the future. And when we're doing that, we're actually using it to allow us to continue to self-sabotage in the future. And that's the reason why she really wants to help us diagnose it. Aaron, what's going on? Good morning. Good morning. Okay, so that is the introduction. Chapter number 1 is the mountain is you. She's like, there's nothing holding you back in life more than yourself. This is really where self-sabotage lies. She says, in the end, self-sabotage is very often just a maladaptive coping mechanism, a way we give ourselves what we need without having to actually address what that need is. But like any coping mechanism, it is just that, a way to cope. It's not an answer, it's not a solution, and it does not truly solve the problem. We are merely numbing our desires and giving ourselves a little taste of temporary relief. So what she's talking about here is just the fact that we self-sabotage because a lot of times we just don't want to feel a different feeling. We don't want to process a feeling that we needed to process, whether it was recent or like in the future, in the past. And because we don't want to feel a certain way, we'll go out and sabotage ourselves. And then, this is just what we always do because we're really trying to keep ourselves safe. I really like how she describes it here in the book. When she talks about self-sabotage, she says it comes from the unconscious negative associations that we've made in our life. She said, your life is defined not only by what you think about, but also what you think of yourself. Your self-concept is an idea that you have spent your whole life building. It was created by piecing together inputs and influences from those around you, what your parents believed, what your peers thought, what became self-evident through personal experience, and so on. Your self-image is difficult to adjust because your brain's confirmation bias works to affirm your pre-existing beliefs about yourself. So basically, it's very easy based off of the situations we've been in, our past experiences we've been through, trauma, what people have said about us, all of those things as we're getting older, we kind of grab onto, and we kind of like put ourselves into like buckets where we label ourselves, right? So we label ourselves procrastinators or introverts or perfectionists or all this kind of stuff. And then we are just going out, like literally going out there to try and prove to the world that that is really true. And I mean, I know for me personally in self-sabotage, that's what I was doing, is whatever I was focusing my time and attention on, when I would give power to certain words like perfectionist or overthinker or anything like that, it would actually prevent me from being able to go out there and make the impact that I wanted to. And it was kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy where I would actually self-sabotage myself and not get myself out there to grow my business, or to do things in the police department, or to do things connecting with Teresa and the kids, things like that. Yeah. So Julie, 100%. Julie says self-concept is so strong. 100%. Julie, good morning. And Susie, good morning, my friend. So she says on page 18, she says, small shifts compounded over time can result in permanent baseline adjustments. However, they often don't stick because we come up on our upper limits. The reason we don't allow those shifts to become baselines is because as soon as our circumstances extend beyond the amount of happiness we're accustomed to, we find ways to both conscious and unconsciously bring ourselves back to a feeling that we're comfortable with. So kind of what I was talking about earlier. If you're uncomfortable about maybe making a sale or having a conversation with somebody, and or putting together a program, or getting people and jumping on and having a one-on-one coaching session, or whatever it is that you're there to offer, the more that you can get in your way of actually doing that, the more comfortable you're going to be, because you won't have to like actually, fulfill on that order. You won't have to sell. You won't have to have a conversation. You won't have to learn. You won't have to struggle. You won't have to fail. And so we can literally go out there and prove to ourselves that like, hey, like we don't prove to ourselves, but unconsciously we go out there and we take those other actions that are off of alignment on what we truly want, because it actually makes us feel a little bit more comfortable, and we can stay in that perpetual cycle, right? But the reason why you're here is because we want to get out of this cycle, right? We definitely want to get out of this cycle. Let me see the next page. She talks about rock bottom. She says, rock bottom is very often where we begin our healing journey. This is not because we suddenly see the light, not because our worst days are magically transmuted into some type of epiphany, and not because someone saves us from our own madness. Rock bottom becomes a turning point because it is only at that point that most people think, I never want to feel this way again. It's a powerful thing when you can make a decision like that. I never want to feel this way again. By the way, my puppy is getting a little bit loud, and if he continues to do this, I'm going to put him outside. But if you guys can't hear, please let me know. Okay. So she talks about making a decision to move forward. And it's really important to make that decision to move forward, because once you make that decision and you say something like she said, like, I never want to feel like this again. Let me go back to the exact, I never want to feel this way again. I do remember lots of different specific areas of my life where I was like, I'm never going to allow this to happen again. And that was the thing that actually helped to prevent me from going back to those old habits. Okay, that was chapter number 1. So chapter number 1 was all about like just realizing why the mountain is you, and why that does not mean you're broken. It's just based off of our past experiences, the things that we've gone through, our parents, our teachers, our friends, all those kind of things, and our brain wanting to keep us safe. So the mountain is you. It is a mountain. It's going to be something that you're going to have to climb. It is going to be hard and difficult, but it doesn't mean you're broken or anything. And I feel like the mountain gives you the greatest opportunity to help other people over the mountain. But in reality, not only does it do that, but it helps equip you with the tools to be able to help them come over the mountain with you. And if you hadn't gone through this mountain, you wouldn't be able to be a guide on the mountain for everybody else, right? So realizing that that's the case, that the mountain might be you, and being okay with that, but being willing to like go through it and fight that fight is a game changer, because you can help so many other people. Chapter number 2 is there's no such thing as self-sabotage. She wants to rewire our thoughts around what self-sabotage is. She says, when you habituate yourself to do the things that move your life forward, you call them skills or habits. When they hold you back, then you call them self-sabotage. But they're the exact same function. She says sometimes it happens by accident, and sometimes it doesn't. It happens not by accident. She said overcoming self-sabotage is not about trying to figure out how to override your impulses. It's first determining why those impulses exist in the first place. So when she talks here about self-sabotage, she talks about it as when you have two conflicting desires. One is conscious and one is unconscious. You know how you want to move forward in your life, and yet you are still, for some reason, stuck and not moving forward. She's like, when you have big, ongoing, insurmountable issues in your life, especially when the solution seems so simple, so easy, and yet so impossible to stick with, what you have are not big problems, but big attachments. She's like, people are pretty incredible in the fact that they basically do whatever they want to do. We can all do whatever we want to do. And so what she talks about is she talks about different forms of self-sabotage. Now, I'm not going to go through all of these. There's literally like, I don't know, like 20 of them. I do want to hit on a couple of them, but these are different things that could be coming up for you that could be uh, maybe preventing you from actually overcoming self-sabotage. All right. First one is resistance. She says, resistance is what happens when we have a new project that we need to work on and we simply can't bring ourselves to do it. It's when we get into a great new relationship and then keep bailing out on plans. It's when we get an amazing idea for our business and then feel tension and anger when it comes to sit down and actually get to work. And so we don't do that. She said the resolution to resistance is your way of slowing down and making sure that it's safe to get attached to something new and important. In other cases, it can also be a warning sign that something isn't quite right and you might need to step back and regroup. She's like, resistance is not the same thing as procrastination or indifference and shouldn't be treated as such. When we are experiencing resistance, there's always a reason. We have to pay attention. If we try to force ourselves to perform in the face of resistance, it usually intensifies the feeling as we are strengthening the internal conflict and triggering the fear that holding us back in that first place. She said, instead of releasing resistance, instead, release resistance requires us to refocus. We have to get clear on what we want, as well as when and why we want it. We have to identify unconscious beliefs that are preventing us from showing up. So that gives you an example of like how she actually in this book goes through this one, for example, resistance to actually achieving that next thing, what you could potentially do to resolve it. And a lot of the solutions here are getting to the unconscious things that are driving your behavior that are trying to get you to stay there. Now, there's another one that's hitting your upper limit. Like there's a certain amount of success that you have. And once you have that amount of success, then you drop back down. Also, something else that she tackles in here. Perfectionism. This is one that I actually do want to talk about because this is one that I struggle with. She's like, when we expect that our work must be perfect the first time we do it, we end up getting into a cycle of perfectionism. She's like, she says, perfectionism holds us back from showing up and trying or really doing the important work of our lives. This happens because when we are afraid of failing or feeling vulnerable or not being as good as we want others to think we are, we end up avoiding the work that is required to actually become good at it. We sabotage ourselves because it is the willingness to show up and simply do it, no matter what you feel, again and again and again, that ultimately brings us to a place of mastery. So getting to that point where you realize that you're going to fail, you're going to struggle, you're going to have some difficulties. And that's a part of the process that helps you learn how to, like we said in the beginning, become the type of person who can help other people through that, right? And that's what perfectionism was doing for me. It was making me not record videos, not record podcasts, not do coaching, because I could convince myself that it's not perfect yet. And that there's other people out there who are doing it perfect. And I forgot that they actually had to start off doing it sucky first before they actually got better at it. So being able to get through this is really, really powerful. She says, she said how to resolve this. She's like, don't worry about doing it well, just do it. Don't worry about writing a bestseller, just write. Don't worry about making a Grammy winning hit, just make music. And she talks about the act of just getting yourself to take that action because that's how you learn, right? A couple other ones are limited emotional processing skills, justification, disorganization. It's another one that can hold people back. Attachment to what you don't really want. Another one is judging others. There's so many different ones. Pride, that was one that definitely I experienced. Is like that ego thing. That was definitely a big thing for me that was holding me back. And so is fear of failing. Fear of failing, I think, is a lot of it. A lot of what we're talking about here today has a lot to do with this whole idea of fear of failing. And when we can convince ourselves that we could potentially fail, then we're not going to do anything. And we don't do anything, we fail by default, right? But it's being able to see that and getting to the root of why your brain is trying to trick you into like not taking action and seeing what comes up for you when that happens. Okay, here's another one. This is one I actually do want to talk about. Worrying about irrational fears and least likely circumstances. This is page 56. By the way, as we go, guys, I want to hear, so this is chapter number 2. I want to hear based off of your readings, which one of these did you highlight? Which one of these specific things that comes up are ones that like come up for you in your life? This one says worrying about irrational fears in least likely circumstances. She said another very common way that people sabotage without realizing is by preoccupying themselves with fears of worst case scenarios. She said irrational fears, especially the kind that are least likely to become reality, are often what we project fears onto. These irrational fears are safe because deep down we know they aren't going to happen. And they are placeholders, a way for us to express the feeling we really have onto something we know isn't going to happen. So we look for all the reasons why this could go wrong. What could actually happen as a result of this? And we preoccupy our brain so much with those scenarios that they don't have to. It doesn't have to think about like actually doing it, or what are people going to think if I do this, or how am I going to be able to help them? The real deep reason that we have to actually attack and figure out why it's you can't focus on that because you're so focused on all of these what if scenarios. I have a lot of people that I coach one-on-one, and when they start to go down the what if, I'm like, stop. This is going to be a complete waste of our time because we can all go through a million what if scenarios, but let's actually talk in what's actually happening right now. What is preventing you right now from doing this? And it's amazing when you stop that noise and you get into what's actually the problem and you help solve that problem. For me, it's using coaching, how much it like unlocks, and then the rest of that other stuff about like using those irrational fears disappears because you actually get to the root of the problem. And when you just destroy that root, all the other things kind of like disappear. That is a really, really powerful strategy to use. It says, the next page 58, it says how to tell if you're in a self-sabotage cycle. So we kind of talked about some of those different things that could be fueling your self-sabotage. But she says, how do you tell if you're into self-sabotage? She says, even if you can cognitively understand self-sabotaging behavior, sometimes the most difficult shift is recognizing that we're even engaging in them. In fact, sometimes the signs are so subtle that they are barely recognizable and often don't come to our attention until they become highly problematic or someone else points them out. Such a very key point. This is the reason why we have our inner circle. This is the reason why I always talk about being a part of memberships or masterminds or teams or getting one-on-one coaching, is because we don't even realize that we're self-sabotaging. And here's the crazy point, guys, is that when you are self-sabotaging, when you are like seeing yourself show up and continue to not take the action, you now get distracted about diagnosing why you're self-sabotaging instead of just getting into your life and destroying that, but just by default. It's crazy how we do this. Our brain says, oh, we're self-sabotaging, so let's spend the whole entire next week thinking about why we're self-sabotaging because that's going to be helpful, right? And that's just focused on what's broken, wrong, or missing. And it's crazy when you have somebody else on the outside going, why does it even really matter? Like why you're doing this? If we can get to the root of the problem, what you're really trying to avoid by self-sabotaging, then we can fix that and you won't have to worry about the self-sabotage. It's kind of like one of those things where a lot of times I find that it actually disappears. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes people need therapy. I know I did. Sometimes they need a little bit more coaching. Sometimes they need a little bit more help around that. But I can't tell you how many times that our brain throws even more things to get us to sabotage. They get us to like really like be stuck in that perpetual cycle of like, I've got to sit down and I've got to diagnose myself first. And it's like, well, you could just get into your life, get into the things you want to do, get into the actual root of the problem. And by doing that, you can solve it so that you don't self-sabotage anymore. It's really powerful what our brains can do. I mean, we're the only things on the planet that can actually have and make decisions based off of our thoughts, right? But we use that against us so much, so much. Sometimes we just need somebody from the outside to go, stop it. Let's go this other path. By the way, right when I said that, my puppy stopped doing whatever he's doing underneath the table. So I guess he knows what that word is. All right, let's see. That was chapter number 2. Let's go into chapter number 3. So chapter number 2 was there's no such thing as self-sabotage. So she was talking about some of the habits, some of the things that we typically do that actually will create self-sabotage. But in chapter number 3, she talks about triggers being the guides to your freedom. Now, a lot of times we can't actually think about some of the things that could potentially be holding us back, the root of the problem, that kind of stuff, right? And I think it's really powerful to have a coach so that you can get to some of the roots of those problems or go see a therapist to do that. But she talks about in this chapter number 3, is one of the things that you can check in with is your feelings, because your feelings will be a really good indicator and a guide to where you have the most opportunity for growth. And let me read. Aaron says, "Not thinking of myself as broken has been such a mindset shift. The whole book was exactly what I didn't know I needed." 100%, me too, Aaron. It is a mindset shift when you're able to make that. Okay, so chapter number 3 is your triggers are the freedom, are the guide to your freedom. She says this is an important part of the process because overcoming your self-defeating habits is not just about knowing what they are or why you engage them. It is also about better understanding what our inherent needs are, what we really desire, and how we can use that as a pivot point to begin building a life that is aligned with who we really are and what we are here to do. She talks about different emotions and trying to interpret what those emotions are trying to teach you. She says how to interpret negative emotions. Through everyone's particular triggers are unique to them, though everyone's particular triggers are unique to them, it helps to better understand the function of some of the feelings we often condemn. Some of the emotions that are most strongly connected with self-sabotaging behaviors are actually important for us to better understand. It is not about simply getting over them. It's about listening to what they are trying to tell us and teach us about from the experience. This is something we talk a lot about in all the programs that we do, because that thing is there to teach you something. And it's whether or not you're going to learn the lesson, or if you're like Mark here and not learn the lesson and have to go through it again and again and again and again, it's because we're unwilling to learn the lesson. And when you get to that point, for me, it was a rock bottom in a couple different places. Then it gave me the ability of saying, you know what, I want to do something a little different. And I reframed that whole entire thing and then was able to learn from that process, right? But I had to get to that point. So some of the emotions, I'm going to go over a couple of them. Anger is the first one. And I'm going to say anger because this is probably the one that I had the most of. And it still does service from time to time, especially if you have something to do with my family. Anger can be one of those things where immediately I jump in there just based off of my pre-programming. They say ultimately, anger is trying to mobilize us to initiate action. Anger is transformative and is often the peak state we reach before we truly change our lives. This is because anger is not intended to be projected onto someone else. Rather, it's an influx of motivation that helps us change what we need to change within our lives. When we do not see it as such, we tend to bury it, not ever resolving the real issue at hand. This is when anger starts to cross over into aggression. And when we take that energy out on those around us, opposed to using it as an impetus to change ourselves. So she talks about anger being like this beautiful transformative emotion. And when we can like look at it and not project it out towards them, but really use it kind of like to help mobilize us into taking a different action, learning that thing, that we can actually use anger for us instead of against us. And I really feel like that's something I do really well most of the time. Sometimes I still don't do it so well. But instead of letting anger be that thing where I shouldn't feel anger, I've got to figure out how to like rebox it up and actually use it for me. Some of the other ones are sadness, guilt, embarrassment, jealousy, resentment, regret. I'm actually going to write in regret because I highlighted this one because that's another one that I feel like an emotion that I used to experience a lot. Um, Much like jealousy, regret is another way that we show ourselves not what we wish we could have done in the past, but what we absolutely need to create going forward. The truth is that most people regret what they did not do more than they ever regret what they did. This isn't a coincidence. Regret isn't actually trying to just make us feel bad that we didn't live up to our own expectations. It is trying to motivate us to live up to them going forward. It is trying to show us what it is absolutely imperative to change in the future and what we really care about experiencing before we die. So can you kind of see how these different things are trying to teach us something, and we're willing to like tap into that trigger, that feeling, right? And reframe it and learn from it, right? Regret or anger or sadness. And I mean, for sadness specifically, like if I'm coaching somebody through a event that they went through where it's kind of like a processing pain moment where they're going through something very, very difficult, like sadness is supposed to be there because it's trying to show you like how important that person was or that thing was, right? Or that job you lost or that marriage or whatever. Like it's supposed to be there and it's supposed to teach you something, right? And usually in the moment, it's kind of like hard to be able to get through it. But when you can understand it and when you can, have a conversation around it, like it does give you that freedom of being able to release it if you choose to be able to release it. She says, okay, this other one, next page is page 80. She says, our internal guidance systems whispering until they scream. It's kind of what I was talking about earlier, related to if we ignore these feelings. She says, the things that are bothering you most right now are not external forces trying to torch you for the sake of it. They are your own mind identifying what in your life can be fixed, changed, and transformed. If you continue to not take action, the siren will only get louder. And if you never learn to listen to it, you'll probably just disassociate from it and then be a victim to it. She said, you already have the answers. You already know what you're here to do. You're here to create everything that would make your life happier than you can imagine. It is only a matter of quieting your mind enough so you can feel all of the unlimited potential that is begging you to be used. Love what she talks about, because if we don't learn that lesson, if we don't try to like listen to what that thing is trying to teach us, we fast forward through it, we don't learn that lesson, then we have to experience it again. And it seems in my life that it gets worse and worse and worse and worse. It doesn't get any better. And that's why being able to identify these triggers and leaning into them instead of pulling away is such an incredible thing that you could do for yourself, but also a gift that you get to give other people, because you got to think about like how you show up when you do that, right? Okay, so that was chapter number 3. Number 4 is building emotional intelligence. She says, and this one hurt when I originally read it, she says, self-sabotage is ultimately just a product of low emotional intelligence. To move on with our lives in a healthy, productive, and stable way, we need to understand how our brains and bodies work together. We need to understand how to interpret feelings, what different emotions mean, and what to do when we are faced with big, daunting sensations that we don't know how to handle. She says, what is emotional intelligence? Emotional intelligence is the ability to understand, interpret, and respond to your emotions in an enlightening and healthy way. She says, your brain is designed to resist what you really want. She's like, something's interested in the human brain when we get what we want. When we imagine what goals we have to achieve, we often do so with the expectations that they will elevate our quality of life. And in some tangible way, once we have them, then we'll be able to coast and not have to do anything. She's like, coast as in like, let go, relax, and everything's just going to be totally fine. She's like, this is not what happens. Neurologically, when we find something we really want, we just start to want it more. New research in the nature of the chemical dopamine, which was previously believed to be the driving force behind desire, lust, and acquisition, proves that it is more complex than previously thought. She says that one of the experts studied the hormone, found out that when an individual was introduced to something they highly desired, the dopamine surge would diminish after they acquire it. Dopamine, it turns out, is not the chemical that gives you pleasure. It's the chemical that gives you the pleasure of wanting more. So getting to that point, like in your business, with your health, or like, I think there is a lot of misconceptions that are out there related to like thinking that you're going to just be able to coast. Like you're not going to have to worry about that stuff anymore. Like things are just going to happen easily. And like Josh always tells us, is like new level, new devil. And that means like, as you continue to grow, you're going to have different things that you want. You're going to have different things you're going to want to be able to achieve and pursue. So trying to trick your brain into thinking that once you get there, it's going to be easy and you're just going to stop is actually something you can do, or actually something that you're doing that's going to self-sabotage you. Because when you get there, you're going to be like, oh, well, this doesn't feel like it was supposed to feel, right? Because you're thinking about and projecting that onto the future. It's actually one thing that she talked a lot about here is predicting, trying to use your brain to predict, to make predictions of what's going to happen and how often that can actually come back and hurt us. She says, when it comes to your body and emotional intelligence, she says, we have to use our minds to practice discernment. We have to use our supreme intelligence to decide where we want to go, who we want to be, and then we have to allow our bodies to adjust over time. We cannot live being governed by how we feel. Our emotions are temporary and not always reflexive of reality. So this is kind of a little bit different than the last chapter. So the last chapter, I feel like she was really talking about like listening to your emotions to get to the root of what it is that emotion is trying to teach you. In this chapter, she's talking about, now that you understand what it is trying to teach you, getting to the point where you can like lean in and take actions that are maybe not in a direct alignment with your emotions, because you want to create something different in your life. And what she's kind of like talking about here, and she's talking about over the rest of this chapter, is how when you do that, your body starts to adapt, and it gets to the point where it starts to have, just like how we talk about in our life coach certification about reprogramming your mind, you reprogram your body to now not experience that situation the way that the way that it normally does. It's kind of like this thing where slowly at a time it starts to become normal for you to not self-sabotage yourself, right? And you do that by realizing that that you can feel emotions and they're temporary, but they're not always reflective. They're not exactly tied to reality. You have to be able to see them as just that. They're emotions that are built inside of you. Sometimes they're built based off of your previous self-sabotaging or previous experiences that you've been in. And it's not one of those things where the world or whatever is trying to what's the word? Like you're waiting for something to happen. You're waiting for that feeling before you take that action. You're waiting to feel motivated. You're waiting to and you're just like literally waiting for that thing to happen before it happens. When in reality, you can just go out there and do that, right? Or at least put yourself in a situation where you're more likely to do that. All right, that was chapter number 4. We're gonna have to go through a little bit faster here. Julie says, once, ouch, true emotional intelligence imperative. Haha. I used to believe in the coast. Yeah. Julie, when I read that, I'm like, I feel like she actually just punched me in the face when I read that. I'm like, oh, I guess I must have some low emotional intelligence. But I feel like I'm improving for sure, but that's definitely not my strength zone. Okay. So chapter number 4 was all about building emotional intelligence, right? Knowing that those feelings are just feelings that are coming up based off of your past and the things that you're going through, but they aren't necessarily connected to reality, right? Saying that those feelings are like your gut feeling all the time is also not the truth, or you have to wait for like something to show you a sign. One of those things, like it could tie into your actually self-sabotaging that process. Number 5 is releasing the past. She talks about releasing the past. This one, I mean, she is, I don't know if she's a psychologist or a therapist, but this is like one of those things where it is kind of like borderline when you're talking about like past events. There's past events that you can actually release yourself from, and then there's some like trauma that you might need some help from a professional. And if that is ever the case, I would highly suggest that you speak to a professional. I've gotten to a psychologist 6 different times in my life, both while I was working my police career and without working my police career. This really helped me get past my past. All right. But I'm going to share some of the highlighted stuff that I put in here. She said, releasing emotional backlog. This is a really great analogy that really helped me to be able to release some of the things that I had in the past related to my emotional backlog. She says, imagine your emotional backlog is like your email inbox. She said, it might be a simple analogy, but it's an effective one. When you experience emotions, it's as though you're getting little messages from your body stacking up one at a time. If you don't ever open them, you end up with 1,000 notifications deep, totally overlooking crucial information and important insights that you need to move your life forward. At the same time, you can't sit around all day and respond to every single message just as it comes up, because you'd never get anything done. She's like, it's a mistake to assume that emotions are optional experiences. They are not. But we are the masters of avoiding our feelings, and we do it in so many ways. Often we rely on substances that physically numb us, projections and judgments that place the attention on someone else's fault as opposed to our own, all kinds of other worldly pursuits, and on the most basic level, tensing our bodies up so efficiently that we are rendered incapable of feeling. She says, psychologically, you probably know that this doesn't work for long. The backlog starts to jam eventually. You are forced to sit and be still and sleep and cry and feel it all. So this is kind of what will happen if we don't actually experience and process those emotions, right? She says it's like 1,000 notifications deep in your inbox. And if you're not opening some of those up, then you're going to have 1,000 of them to deal with at the same time. And that is like a lot that we kind of do. It's kind of like that whole idea of like pushing down our emotions, right? I remember like when I was younger, I would hear this, boys don't cry. And I remember like, trying to hold back my tears because I'm like, boys don't cry, right? But I can't tell you how much that actually hurt me, because crying is one of those things where I feel like there are pivotal moments and pivotal times when I do that. And because I do that, it's like a release and processing of the emotion, because I know it's okay to feel that way and not to push it away and to pretend like I'm not a man because I cry. And being able to lean into that, I think, has been super helpful for me. But that was chapter number 5. And chapter number 5 is about releasing the past. So finding someone to help you do that is really, really incredibly important. But also like thinking about, she says, healing your mind is completely different because you aren't returning to what you were before. You're gutting yourself and becoming something else entirely new. What she kind of means through this chapter is to be able to process the pain, and whether you need to find somebody to get them to help you process it, or you can process it through a coach or through maybe even just reading this book and processing it. But once you process it, you don't go back to your original settings. You actually become somebody else different in the process, where it's not like, oh, like I did my factory reset and I'm back to normal. No, you've actually gained all of this knowledge and experience, and you've learned from this event. So you become an entirely different person when you are willing to process it. Hard thing to process it, hard thing to be willing to process it. But when you do, it's amazing, because on the other end, you become an entirely different human. Chapter number 6 is building a new future. She says, now that you've done the challenging work of beginning to release your past experiences, you must turn your attention toward building a new present and future. When we release, we are wiping the slate clean to create something better. One of the most common pitfalls of people who are try to not succeed in releasing their past is that their focus remains on just that, the past. The work is now to envision who you want to be, connect with the most powerful version of yourself, design your life through your daily routine, and uncover your true purpose of being. Sorry, guys. So all about like thinking about what you really want, like beginning with the end in mind. And when you can begin with the end in mind, you can really find out what you truly want to be able to accomplish. She has some steps in here. I'll go through these really quick. She says, step number 1 is to face the fear first. Step number 2 is to notice how your future self looks, having gone through that fear. Step 3 is to ask for guidance. And step 4 is imagine them handing you the keys to your new life. Those are really powerful steps to be able to help you release that thing that is kind of like holding you back. Let me see what other pieces of this chapter I actually highlighted. This is chapter number 6, by the way. I'd love to hear from you guys, like what you've highlighted so far in chapter number 6. Actually, I don't have any other things in chapter number 6. I'm going to go right to chapter number 7. This is the final chapter. Really powerful chapter about from self-sabotage to self-mastery. She said, moving from self-sabotage to self-mastery sounds like an extraordinary transformation, when in reality, it's the natural course of coming to understand that you are responsible for holding your life back. And so you are also capable of moving it forward. And how we do that is we move from self-sabotage into self-mastery. There's a piece here. She says, she's like, there's another metaphor in meditation in which calmness is compared to steadying a lake or a large body of water. Your thoughts and actions are like stones in the water. They create a ripple effect. The point of meditation is to make yourself quiet enough so that as the water comes back to its natural stillness, but you don't have to force the water to be still. It does it on its own when you stop interrupting it. The same goes for finding inner peace. It's not so much about something you have to create as it's something you have to return to. This looks like you creating aligned goals that are aligned with what you truly want. She says, when we grow up, we adapt to our environments. We adopt the beliefs and ideas of those around us. We alter our personality so that we can become safer. We believe the world can't hurt us. When we are children, we are more vulnerable than ever, and it's during this time that we pick up what we can easily become lifelong coping mechanisms. If we are not instructed from a young age to connect with our inner sense of peace, we will instinctively begin to trust the voice in our head. This is where we really get lost, because the thoughts that we have on any given day are largely the product of what the Buddhists would call the monkey mind, or as neurologists could explain it, the process of different receptors firing off and making associations with things that may or may not have anything to do with reality. So really what they're talking about, or what she's talking about, to get from self-sabotage to self-mastery has a lot to do with inner peace, being at peace with yourself and letting the waters, stop throwing big boulders into the waters and letting yourself have that peace. She's like, why can't people find their inner peace easily? She says, everyone has an inner child. It is the part of you that is most innocent and pure, and it never goes away. Over time, it is your responsibility for you to learn how to parent the inner child, who will honestly be the one to push you away from your inner peace. They'll be the one to throw a tantrum and to tell you that everything is falling apart and that you're going to die and that you should give up. In the same way you wouldn't let a child run over your waking life now, you can't always believe what your inner child is afraid of. You can, however, learn to work with them, heal them, and make them feel safe in a way that any good parent would. It says Steph Diamond explains it like this. To begin with, the inner child is real, not literally, not physically, but figuratively, metaphorically real. It is, like complexes in general, a psychological or phenomenological reality, and an extraordinary, powerful one at that. He argues that mental disorders and destructive behavior patterns are usually more or less related to unconscious parts of ourselves and were most often adopted in early life. So it's things that we have experienced in our life. Becoming mentally strong. No matter, this is page 220, no matter who you are or what your purpose is in life, mental strength is going to be a key component in ensuring that you actualize all of the potential latent within you. Mental strength is not a fixed trait. It is not something we inherently have or don't. Ironically, it's not necessarily easier to have if you aren't faced with many challenges in life. In fact, it is often people who are in the most difficult circumstances that are forced to develop the highest degrees of mental strength. We had a video inside of our inner circle talking about like how to develop mental toughness in your business, because it's one of those things where when you develop mental toughness, when you go through situations, when you're experiencing self-sabotage, when you get through it, when you understand what it's trying to teach you, and then you take full control of that inner child and you lead yourself through this with the help of others, not saying you have to do it by yourself, it gives you the greatest opportunity to, number one, have control over your self-sabotage forever. Because I feel like as I go, like when it comes to like the mountain, I feel like I get onto a new mountain every single time I climb one. I get to the top and I'm like, that is awesome. I'm so glad. But then there's another mountain after that. But when you know the process to go through to identify what it is, it's your demons, identify what is actually holding you back, figure out a way of like learning what those feelings are trying to teach you, and then disassociating yourself from feelings in terms of not disassociating, but really thinking about feelings as like, oh, this is just based off of my fears related to what I've been self-sabotaging, and that I don't have to take actions that is in alignment with those fears and with those feelings because they're not in alignment with what I truly want. And being able to like go back and rework this, which is not an easy thing. I mean, you guys just heard us go over this in like 42 minutes and it felt like a fire hose, which is why this book is so powerful. But I hope if you haven't, that you've gone through this, that you've highlighted it, that you've like circled it, done everything you possibly can so you can revisit it as you go and know that when you overcome your mountain, not only can you help so many other people overcome their mountains too, but you are going to be able to take this with you on any other mountains that you now climb over. Now, that is one piece that I want to end with here. And that is like, you guys have climbed mountains before. You've done hard things. You've been able to accomplish things. You've been able to get out of your way. You've been able to have success. And so many times when we're in the middle of self-sabotage, especially a lot of my clients that I work with, is they fail to remember that they've done hard stuff. They've gone through this before. They've actually overcome it. They've made it out on the other end. And you have the framework, not only in this book, but in your own past experiences to be able to get through it. And when you're able to get through it, it empowers you to help other people get through it too. And by being able to do that, by being able to go through this suck, as they would say, it empowers you so much to be able to move forward, to get out of your own way and to create what you truly want. Because there's nothing that I want more for you than to be able to, like we say in on our Modern Leadership channel, or grow a business that you truly love and enjoy. Connect with your family on an entirely different level where you have great conversations, you're creating great memories, and making sure that your physical and mental health is on point. You're taking care of yourself. You're getting sleep. You're in the best shape of your life, because you can have all three of those when you're willing to fight, and climb over your mountain. That I promise you. All right, guys. Appreciate you so much for making it here. If you have not filled out the survey recently, we're picking our next book inside of the Business Leadership Book Club. If you're not a part of the book club, I'll leave you the link below so that way you can click on it so you can join. If you haven't filled out the survey link is inside of our app. And then, of course, I just appreciate you guys so much. I know we have a lot of Inner Circle members here with Susie and Julie and Joe Marie. Always super pumped to have you guys on the call with us. But if there's anything that I could ever do, please don't hesitate to reach out and ask. Look forward to seeing you guys inside of the app, inside of the group on our next book, which I will be picking, or you guys will be picking next week. All right. You guys have an incredible, incredible week. Have a great day, and I'll see you real soon. All right. All right. Bye, everybody.